Good Erev Shabbos, Parshas Balak. The Parsha of Balak is in essence the story of Balak's attempt through Bilam to attack and destroy the people by the agency of Bilam's prophecy. Now this is a rather striking thing that in Judaism we believe and ascribe the ability of prophecy not to be limited simply to the Jewish people, who one might have thought due to the covenantal relationship between Bnei Yisrael and Hashem, that prophecy is limited to Bnei Yisrael. But the Torah tells us clearly the prophecy was not limited to Bnei Yisrael, but Bilam ben Beor was a bona fide and legitimate prophet of Hashem, a Navi Hashem. The Medrash, however, takes this perhaps somewhat striking thought and puts it on steroids. Says the following. The Torah tells us sometime later on, at the end of the Chumash, "Lo kam naviot b'Yisrael." There would never be another prophet like Moshe and the Jewish people. So says the Medrash, "B'Yisrael lo kam." It's true that within Bnei Yisrael there would never be such a prophet. Aval b'umos ha'olam kam. However, within the nations of the world, the Gentile community, there would be and there could be such a prophet. And who was that prophet who actually did arise? Our very own Bilam ben Beor from this week's Parsha. Now this is striking. Inasmuch as there could be prophecy outside of the covenantal community, to say that there could be a prophet who could approach the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu, wow, that is shocking on its face. However, the Medrash goes on to show some differences between the prophecies of Bilam and Moshe Rabbeinu. Hefresh yesh ben nevuaso shel Moshe lenevuaso shel Bilam. So what are these differences? And maybe in these differences we will find how Moshe Rabbeinu was head and shoulders above Bilam. Okay, what are the three? What are the differences? There are three of them. First, says the Medrash, Moshe lo haya yodea mi medaber imo. When Moshe, at least initially, met Hashem, he didn't necessarily know who he was talking to. Bilam, however, haya yodea mi medaber imo. Bilam knew who he was talking to. So that would seem to indicate that not only were they equals, but maybe Bilam was on an even higher level of prophecy. After all, he appreciated and understood and knew the presence of the divine when he saw it. And the Medrash brings a pasuk to this effect. Ne'um shomea imrei kel. So says the Medrash. There is a second difference. Moshe lo haya yodea masai medaber imo. Moshe did not know when Hashem would speak with him until Hashem spoke with him. Bilam, however, haya yodea masai medaber imo. Bilam knew when Hashem would be speaking to him. And that also, quite shockingly, seems to indicate that not only did Bilam approach the level of Moshe's prophecy, he might have eclipsed it and surpassed it. Because there is one level when, if I, for example, meet a friend in the street and I say, hey, we should meet sometime, why don't you come over? That certainly is a generous thing to do, but what confers greater dignity upon the other is if I call my friend or neighbor up in advance and say, listen, would you like to meet for lunch on Tuesday at 2 o'clock? If I just happenstance meet you in the street, that's a nice thing, but certainly it doesn't confer the same type of dignity on the relationship. And here, the Medrash is telling us Moshe Rabbeinu never knew when Hashem would be speaking to him. It could happen at any time. Bump into him in the street. But Bilam had it down on the schedule. So from this perspective, it seems that Bilam again is eclipsing Moshe Rabbeinu's nevuah. And there is a third and final distinction that the Medrash says. Moshe lo haya medaber imo ela kishu omed. Moshe did not receive prophecy except when he was standing. As the pasuk says, V'ata po amod imadi. And you, Moshe, will stand next to me. However, Bilam haya medaber imo kishu nofel. Bilam would have prophecy with Hashem when he was fallen, when he was falling on the ground. And the Medrash cites a pasuk to that effect. So, whose prophecy is greater? Is Moshe's prophecy greater than Bilam, or is Bilam's prophecy greater than Moshe? From these three differences, it would seem that Moshe's prophecy was greater than Bilam's. And in this last one, if I have to stand at attention when I receive the prophecy versus being able to get it while I'm lying down on the couch, well, the one that seems that there is a greater relationship with the one who can get it even while they're lying down on the couch. They're falling on the floor. But Moshe Rabbeinu has to be, ramrod, like a soldier talking to a general. However, I would like to suggest, or to explain this medrash, based on an idea that Rav Soloveitchik delivered many decades ago in a very lengthy and compelling presentation. And to boil it down into a word, Rav Soloveitchik suggests that Moshe Rabbeinu had something head and shoulders above Bilam. And that is that Moshe Rabbeinu was not only a prophet of Hashem. Anybody can be a prophet if they achieve that level, whether Jew or non-Jew, but there's something above that, and that is being a shliach, that is being a representative of Hashem. What does it mean to be a shliach, a representative? It means, says Rav Soloveitchik, when the agent, the representative, identifies with his sender. Let's use a common example. You have a country and a president or a king or a monarch or a prime minister, and they send out ambassadors around the world. The ambassador speaks not on his own. The ambassador is actually an arm representing the government or the monarch or the king or the president or the prime minister for whom he's speaking on behalf. If one wants, and presumably the ambassador has the ear of the prime minister or the president, and the ambassador is close. The ambassador identifies and represents the individual who sent him. And that is Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was not simply one who was receiving prophecy, but was an agent of Hashem, and had therefore a certain intimacy and identification with Hashem. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu, from that perspective, let's look at all three of these differences, and we'll see that Moshe Rabbeinu is actually, his nevuah, his prophecy, demonstrates and dramatizes greater intimacy and identification with Hashem. And thus his nevuah is more profound. And I believe that there's an important lesson for us here at the end. So let's take a look at these three once again. Number one, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know who he was speaking with. When we're so close with another person, a good friend, a spouse, somebody that we have a deep relationship with, sometimes we don't have to speak to each other. We know what the other person is going to say. What the Medrash is telling us here is that Moshe had such an intimate relationship with God, it was hard to distinguish what were his own thoughts and what was representing Hashem. That's how close and intimate. When the Medrash says he didn't know he didn't know who was speaking, it is in essence saying not that he didn't know who he was speaking. He didn't realize whether it was himself or Hashem, because that is how intimate the relationship was. Number two, Moshe Rabbeinu wouldn't know necessarily when Hashem was speaking to him. That seems to confer a lack of respect on Moshe. But no, who do I have a greater intimacy with and a greater identification with? With a friend who I meet in the street, or my very good friend, my spouse, who I don't have to make appointments to meet. I just call him up. I met him in the street. Come on over. Do I have to make an appointment to speak with my spouse? Maybe if our lives are so busy, that might be the case. But really, you don't have to make an appointment to speak with one's spouse or one's really close friend. The fact that Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem could speak to him at any time, showed intimacy, not a lack of respect. And then thirdly, the posture. Moshe Rabbeinu was standing. Bilam even fallen on the ground. It's not a lack of dignity for Moshe that he had to make him stand like a soldier standing before a general. No. The pasuk that the Midrash quotes, the atapo amod imadi, comes from the Torah when Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, you tell the people, return to your tents. Shvu le'ohalechem, v'ata, and you, Moshe, po amod imadi. You are going to stand next to me. You're going to stand with me, and I'm going to impart to you all the laws of the Torah. When you are able to stand next to somebody, that shows that the person gives you respect and confers dignity upon you. If you're in court and you have to seek permission to approach the bench, there's a certain awe and reverence and distance between the petitioner, the lawyer, the juror, and the judge. But here, Moshe Rabbeinu was invited. You stand next to me. That's the type of nevuah that Moshe had. He was standing next to the Ribono Shel Olam, not behind him, not away from him, not fallen on the ground in an obsequious manner. Moshe Rabbeinu could stand almost as it were, and not for sure, but almost as equals. So each one of these distinctions between Moshe Rabbeinu and Bilam actually confers a greater status on Moshe Rabbeinu and a lesser status on Bilam. And that is the godless of Moshe Rabbeinu, that he was a shliach of Hashem, a representative of the divine on earth. And this is the model that we are meant to learn from this dichotomy, this distinction, this difference between Moshe Rabbeinu and Bilam. We should follow the model of Moshe Rabbeinu and see ourselves as divine representatives, ambassadors of the divine, to create a Kiddush Hashem, to see and create an intimacy between ourselves and Hashem, such that we then can represent Hashem properly in this world. Because like it or not, people judge us as representatives of Hashem. So if that's the case already, why not aspire and to be a fine representative of the divine? Moshe Rabbeinu, in conclusion, had one other thing. He was not only a shliach Hashem, he was a shliach of Bnei Israel. He was a representative of the divine to the world and a representative of the people to Hashem. And in doing so, Moshe Rabbeinu demonstrated affinity and intimacy and concern and identification with Hashem on the one hand and with the people on the other. And as it was with Moshe Rabbeinu, let us feel that same connection, that same intimacy, that same sense of self-sacrifice, both to Hashem as well as to our neighbor. Good Shabbos.